All right, hello everybody, and happy Wednesday. Today we are going to be talking about the new shelf report, which you guys should have received an email about recently if you are a Summit Analytics subscriber. Um, let's go ahead and dive on in. If I can, there we go. All right, so with the Edelweiss+Analytics tools, we provide two different subscription levels. One is Basecamp and one is Summit. And to put it simply, the Basecamp version of analytics tools really is just a data feed of your point of sale inventory and sales history into the comps area of Edelweiss. You guys probably all are quite familiar with that. So that's what Basecamp is. The Summit version, which we're talking about today, is all the other tools. So the most popular titles, top not yet released, the stock analysis, all that fun stuff. So lots of different ways to measure the strength of your inventory and some of the weaknesses and find trends and measurements and compare your categories to each other, all that fun stuff. And then of course that's all integrated now into Edelweiss Plus, and hopefully you're using that and making your inventory stronger in that way. We're now introducing the shelf report, which is of course what we're talking about today. So the shelf report is a semi-annual report. You guys will be getting so this is the first one, and then you'll be getting another one in 6 months, and we'll show you how to make sure that that's set up and how to control who gets that report and all that fun stuff here in just a bit. Basically, an early user, one of our beta testers, said that the shelf report is like the abacus report, but for your inventory, which I think is a pretty apt description in a lot of ways, because we're going to provide you numbers for different strengths and different measurements, and the hard part is knowing, like, is that a good number or a bad number? And so we've also introduced some benchmarks in there, which is essentially like an average of all the other Summit Treeline users. And so you're going to see, are you above average, right at average, or below average in this particular genre, and what can you do to fix it? So essentially we'll show you how you're doing and then give you the tools to improve. It is pretty cool that you're going to be able to view your inventory through a macro lens, which is the third point down there. So really kind of a 30,000 foot view of your inventory and how it's performing. And then you're going to be able to go right on down to the title level to see how a specific title's doing, or is this title moving or not, that kind of thing. It really, for all intents and purposes, it's really a report card. And that last point, it's a report card for your buying as well as for your overall inventory management. So I think a lot of times people really concentrate on buying and don't necessarily concentrate on the hard part, the part that's not fun and sexy. It's the inventory management, which is, how are things doing? How is my buying affecting the inventory, and am I doing a good job? Which sometimes, if you are, then you definitely want to know that. If you're not, sometimes it's hard to know that. So keep that in mind. You may not like some of the stuff that you see, but there are tools for improvement here. So hopefully you're motivated in that way. So each of the genres, and we'll talk about the genre thing here in just a second, but each genre is going to be measured by 4 different measurements. There's the freshness, relevance, hit rate, and turnover. So freshness is essentially, is what I'm stocking selling, to put it quite simply. And then relevance is, am I stocking titles that everybody else is selling? And then the hit rate, which is my personal new favorite actually, is of what I'm bringing in of the new titles, what is selling and what is not. And then the turnover, you should be probably relatively familiar with turns. Basically a good overall measure of the profitability, and essentially like how many times a year does the average title sell, and how often does your inventory turn over. So again, with the report card thing, when it looks good, like this is a particularly nice looking genre report, and you'll see what each of these means as we dig in a little bit later, but this one looks great. There's lots of green on the screen, which is kind of what you want. You'll see that everything's color coded. But again, this is one of those things, like when you come across a genre, you're like, yeah, I am killing it with, kids' board books. That's awesome. And then you go to history, you're like, that's not good. But again, you can click around here and find titles to get rid of, and then find titles to bring in to replace those that hopefully will sell better, and that kind of thing. I do want to stress as well that this whole thing, the shelf report, it really just augments your Summit analytics tools. So this is a way to see how the work that you did with those analytics tools pans out. So a baseline measurement for where you are now, and then you can test again in 6 months and see how all your hard work paid off, because you're going to do some hard work, right? That's the whole point of all this. But we do have a couple webinars coming up. Hopefully I won't have a cold then, so my voice won't be quite as rumbly. But March 6th, we're getting a deep dive into the Summit Edelweiss+Analytics. So really dive it into each of the tools there to show you how to use them and what everything means. And then March 13th, we're doing one for various analytics subscription levels. Not various, there's two, Basecamp and Summit. So for people who are not sure where they want to be, that'll be a good one. It's going to be pretty simple, frankly. Basecamp has this one thing, and then Summit has all the other things. So let's take a tour. I'm going to see if I can do this smoothly, somewhat. All right, so there are a few little things that I want to show you here in Edelweiss Plus itself to get you squared away with the shelf report. The first one is that you can add a widget, which is going to be a shortcut to the shelf report itself. So if you click on Add Widget, you'll see the Analytics option down here at the bottom, and then the shelf report is that first option. If you click that, you're going to get a quick view of the shelf report itself, kind of the first screen. Of course, it was working a second ago. So basically, to get into your shelf report, you just click on the name of your store up here at the top. If you have multiple locations, you're going to want to click here, and then you can choose between your various locations there. And you can create a new widget. If you have 2 locations, you can create 2 widgets and see the shelf report for each one of your stores if you like. So that's the first one. The second one is to provide access to these tools to your various users. So right now, like this first shelf report was not emailed directly to you. The next ones will be. It's not quite automated yet. But to ensure that you and whoever you like receives that, go back to the basic information here. You can see your user privileges here. User administration is what you're going to need to be able to give everybody else access. If you're not a user administrator, then you want to find out who at your store is. If there isn't one, and there should be, then just contact us at support@abovethetreeline.com and we'll get you hooked up. But again, you click into account users and just click on somebody's name, the great Kirby here, and then you click into privileges and the emailed report recipient is what you would want to click. And then on the next round of shelf reports, this person will get an email with a link right to your shelf report. Some people are going to want to hold those close, and others are going to share it with everybody. It's kind of really just depends on how you operate and how you manage. So those are really the 2 shelf report related things that happen within Edelweiss Plus itself. So go to this shelf report. A few things here on navigation. You can, if you hit Control on your keyboard and minus or plus, you can blow up or shrink the screen there. And that's just with every browser, but it's nice on this one as well. Again, if you do have multiple stores, you're going to be able to select between those stores down here. This is just a single store account, so there's nothing to select, but you'll see a menu pop up if you have more than one location. And then up here on the little gearbox, it's not a gearbox, it's just a gear, sorry. Some of these are just for me, but you can create a PDF of this complete report if you like. So you can print the whole thing out and have something to peruse at your leisure, if that's your thing. And then the open help resources is a key one. This will take you right to all about the shelf report in not excruciating detail. I wrote those, so hopefully it's not excruciating. But it should walk you through things to look at, how to use each of the pages and that sort of stuff. So all the stuff we're talking about today, really. And then the second thing, or third, wherever we are, this jump to here is really great. It's the easiest way to navigate all around the pages. You can jump to any page from here. But that being said, we're going to start right here. So basically what we're seeing here is your freshness, relevance, hit rate, and turnover scores and how they have risen or declined in the last 6 months. So you can see here the turns for this demo store went down almost 2%, but everything else went up pretty significantly. But if you're curious, you can click on the little question mark here to see how everything's calculated, the different scores and then how those are calculated. And then if you're curious about what relevance itself means, you can click there. It'll take you right to an explanation. And again, that is also accessible within the jump to down here at the bottom. So if you're not sure what the hit rate means, you can just click right into there and see what that means. We'll get to that in a minute. So really, this is just like a really quick flashcard of how things are going at this store. And for the most part, like, okay, nothing spectacular, but nothing catastrophic either. Generally speaking, the more green that you see, green is going to be considered above average, and then the yellows and oranges are going to be, and reds are going to be very below average. So the store is fine, basically. And really the first pages here, we're going to go to the next one. These first pages are going to give you a walkthrough of what all this stuff means. And go ahead and take your time, especially with this first one. You don't have to just dive right into the report. You can take your time and read the instructions. I played video games a lot with my brother when I was a kid, and I always beat him horribly because I read the instructions first and he never did. So take that as you will. So again, this will just kind of walk you through what each of these things mean. I'm embarrassed by that anecdote. So this is going to show you there are genre pages, and for each genre there's going to be each column representing each measurement, and it's basically showing you little things to look at here. Like for example, this gray line here is the benchmark. So if you're above the benchmark or below it, you're going to be above or below average here. You can click into each of these little pieces and see which titles are represented in those measurements. All that fun stuff. A little bit about the genre thing. I think we're about to get. All right, so here's a table of contents. It'll get you where you need to go. So all the different genres. So because we are doing benchmarking, we have to use industry-wide genres, basically. So if you may have, your horse books may be in a section called horses, or you may have them in pets, or you may have them in animals. You're all going to do it differently, but the industry itself does not. And so if we're going to be measuring everybody against each other, we need to use those, industry-wide measurements. And we took a little bit of liberty here and split things out a little bit as well, and did some formats and that kind of stuff. But so that's why you're not going to necessarily be able to see your specific categories, because your specific categories have no benchmark compared to everybody else. So that's where we are here. With this particular page, really quickly, is just going to show you your top 15 strengths, and then your bottom 15, we call them opportunities. They're not weaknesses. It basically places genres that are weaker and opportunities for improvement. Both are important. It's great to know where you're kicking butt, and it's great to know where you're getting your butt kicked, I guess, if that's how you want to view it. You can click into each of these to jump right into a genre report there, a genre detail page. So you can kind of bounce back and forth here. So this next page, this is going to show within those 4 measurements how all of your genres together fit. So again, so these are all color coded here. This turnover one has all the pretty colors here. So we'll look here. The dark green means the turnover for the categories in this section of the pie are significantly above average. Moderately above in the light green, the yellow are average, orange is moderately below average, and the red are significantly below average. It's always nice when the red is small and the green is big to put that easily. Again, the freshness is going to show, within each of these genres, what percentage of the titles in it are fresh, which means that they have sold. And that's going to be based on the shelf days measurement in the Summit analytics tools. Hopefully you've come across that. But basically, shelf days is a measurement that's the number of copies on hand multiplied by the days since it last sold. So if you have 1 copy on hand that hasn't sold in 3 days, that's going to have a shelf day score of 3. And if you have 1 copy that hasn't sold for a year, that's going to have a shelf day score of 365. And one is clearly better than the other. So the larger that number, the longer a title has been sitting on the shelf without making you any money, which is not what it's there for, as a side note. So this is actually showing, with this demo store, we do have a little measurement here showing improvement here. So there is, in this way, the freshness has improved quite a bit over last month, as well as the relevance and the hit rate is about the same. Basically, again, this is showing everything. And then if you want to know, within the relevance here, how everything's doing, this is going to be a big genre assessment of relevance, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I just wanted to show you that you can jump around and see, what within each of these measurements, how things are doing, and then get a breakdown of it. And so here we are. This is the freshness assessment. So this is going to take each of those genres, and they're split up by adult nonfiction, and then adult fiction, and then youth. And again, the color coding is going to be the same all throughout the shelf report here. So this little gray dot here is going to be where most stores are, where the average store is, in regards to the freshness scores with biographies, for example. They are here. This store is moderately above average, which is great. And really, this store looks, for the most part, pretty good. Their gardening is not awesome, but that's okay. Maybe that's not their strength. I'm sorry, it's not their strength, but maybe it could be with some help. And again, if you want to see what's happening within gardening, we can click on gardening and dive in and see. And we're going to dive into what all this stuff means here in just a second. So that's the genre by genre measurements and score. And then you're going to be able to see, this is more according to performance. So Those 9 genres that are doing great and are above average in that freshness score are all going to be listed in here and on down here. So technically speaking, you could say, okay, I may need to do some returns. Maybe I'll go and look in, music and see, because that's one of the genres that are not performing quite as well as I would hope. So then you could click into music and see, what exactly is happening in here. And the next measurement is relevance. So again, that's going to be of all the titles that all of your colleagues are selling, what percentage of those do you have? So you may have, so this is where I give my snowflake speech. So like every store out there is unique and awesome and has its own special personality and is a special snowflake. But you're all buying your books from the same places for the most part. So if everybody else is carrying a number of titles that are selling really well for them and you have chosen not to carry those, this is an opportunity to maybe, I don't want to say fix that, but reconsider, because maybe those titles don't work for your store, and that's great, but maybe you should try them too. I'm just saying. So in this case, the store is, for the most part, like pretty below average on the relevance scale. Except for YA romance, they're kicking butt. So that's cool. Good for them. And again, you can see the breakdown here by performance as well. And then next measurement is the hit rate. And again, so this is going to be titles that were published within the last 3 to 15 months and whether or not they sold, basically. So it's a sell through on new purchases. And I really like this measurement in a way because it's a way for you to, I guess it's a report card for the front list buyer. You may have, maybe the front list buyer and the back list buyer is the same person. That's great. But if it's a different person, then they may not see things eye to eye necessarily. But this is a way to measure how effective that front list buyer is. And if it's you and everything looks green, good job. Again, so breaks it down according to performance here. And the next one is going to be the turnover. And so this is essentially sell through, how quickly your titles are selling through. And that's going to be within each genre. So, health and fitness, the turns are not fantastic. They're here at 1.22, whereas YA, sci-fi, and fantasy, 9.45, which is phenomenal. Of course, health and fitness is not as remotely as attractive a category as YA, science fiction, and fantasy, so you'd kind of expect to see that. But health and fitness could surely be changed to not be quite such a drain on your inventory and on your pocketbook. And that's why those little red dots are there, to give you a warning about that category. So we break it down again. And then we dive into the specific genre. So I'm going to look at fiction, just because everybody pays a lot of attention to fiction. So these genre detail pages are delineated by adult nonfiction, and then the next one is fiction. We're just going to go to fiction miscellaneous. Excuse me. All right, so this one is pretty average, really. So again, with each of these measurements, that benchmark is going to be the gray line here. And you're going to see, like for fiction, these guys are right at the average. So 80% of the titles are doing pretty good. But they also have, out of 1,125 titles, they have 223 that are stale. So titles that have been sitting around for quite a while. Some of them are only 1 to 3 years stale. Some of them are over 5 years stale. Oftentimes those are going to be your local self-published folks, unfortunately. Not always. But hopefully that's what's in there, frankly. But you can click in here and see a list. Sometimes the first time you do this, it can take a little bit to pull up. But basically, this is going to show you, within the market, how is this particular title doing? It remains of the day, still selling great. It's the Everyman's Library edition. This has one copy on hand, but it's been sitting around for a long time. So that's definitely worth reconsidering on whether or not that needs to be there anymore. 5 copies of this particular title probably doesn't need to be 5 copies, etc. If you're not sure about a title, you can click on it and go right to the Edelweiss page. You see a little bit more about it, comms for it. You can pound it on an order if you like, or get rid of it. You can export this list to a CSV if you like, and that can be your pull list if you like. So that's the freshness scale here. The relevance again is going to be, of all the top selling titles out there, what do you have? These guys have 23% of the titles that everybody else is selling. They are missing 144 titles that the top that have been sold by at least 50% of all other retailers. So that's quite a bit. Based on what I'm seeing with all these numbers here, the turns, which are not terrible, they're okay. But then all the stale titles, like you could do a swap here, like return these guys and then buy these guys and probably see a big bump here. I say probably because who knows? Depends on how you merchandise it and all that kind of stuff, right? So that being said, too, with these stale titles, that may very much be an opportunity for you to, face some of these out or put them on a display, see what happens. Put them on a sale cart. Stale cart, actually, that'd be fun. But basically, obviously, it's better to sell something than to return it. But at some point, you got to just get rid of stuff. But here, again, those lists of titles that everybody else is selling pretty well and that you don't have, definitely worth checking out. You'd be like, what? They don't have Lincoln in the Bardo? At this point, no, they don't. So definitely worth looking at that list and gauging and seeing if that's something that you want to bring in. The hit rate, again, it's my new personal favorite measurement. This is, of all the titles that you have brought in that were published in the last 3 to 15 months, I sold 71%, which is not terrible, right? And it's average. It's right at the average. But we're also looking at 70 of those titles sold well, which means over 5 sales, and 552 sold 1 to 5 copies, and then 255 sold nothing. So these are brand new books that you brought in and they died. The DOA stands for dead on arrival, which is hilarious, I guess. But definitely worth looking at those. I mean, for me, looking at this list, the good that sold really well, and looking at the DOA list makes perfect sense to me. See what really worked for you and also see what your customers didn't care about. And that's kind of what that comes down to. Like, it doesn't matter how great those books are, because there's probably some literary gems in there. But if your customers don't want to buy them, then it kind of doesn't matter. Which is a harsh way to look at it, I think, I'll admit. But honestly, like, you're in business to sell books to your customers. And again, maybe it's a display issue, or some of these were they should have been a staff pick, or who knows. It's however you sell books, right? Like, that's whatever you do to sell books did not happen with these books. Kind of is what that comes down to. So again, you can click through there and see a list of stuff that should probably go away or be I don't want to even show those books now. I feel bad. Sorry, authors. But those could be re-merchandised and all that kind of stuff. And within here, the turns for the fiction genre here are 3.2, which generally speaking, 3 is a relatively healthy turn for a category, and it semi-profitable there. To be honest, I mean, you can see it is below average. Most stores really do really well with fiction, and this one is kind of struggling a little bit. I just did a lot of talking with my hands, which you couldn't see, but it was really engaging, I assure you. So down here, there's also key stats. So there's the contribution. So this is kind of a measurement. You could see it as 1 is balanced. So the inventory and the sales complement each other. Most of your peers here, the contribution is 1.22, which means that the sales are larger than the inventory, which is good. That means higher turns. In this case, it's under 1, which means not as good, basically. And you can see the percentage of the inventory here. So this fiction miscellaneous here represents 12% of the total inventory for the store. The average in most stores is just under 15%. The percentage of sales is only 8% at the store, where the average among peers is 16% or over, which is a pretty significant difference there. And then you can see the average number of copies here, which take that as you wish. You can also view trends in here. And this is going to show you over the years, over the months, I should say, where each measurement is. So how many titles on hand, number of copies per title, and then each of those measurements. So you'll see, you would probably see bumps, I would think, around December. Not necessarily here, though. It's a little bit odd. So an assessment of this particular genre is that they need to dump a bunch of stuff that nobody wants to buy and bring in some fresh stuff, really, is kind of what it comes down to, and can pretty much guarantee that they'll see their turn spike. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to jump to another category that looks really good. Is that YA sci-fi fantasy? I think, yeah. So here, 171 titles here. They only have 24 that are stale. Oops, sorry. That's pretty good. Right, the smaller that number, the better, essentially, because you want each book on your shelf to be paying rent. If they're not, then the book sitting next to it has to pay double if you want to maintain it. Yeah, anyways, you're with me on that. But again, so they're just above average here on the freshness scale, so that's pretty good. A little bit below average on the relevance, but they're only missing 11 titles that most people are selling that they aren't. These other, the 20 to 50%, like if you're looking to beef up a category, then yeah, definitely like look at these first before you start looking at other titles that may or may not be selling elsewhere. And then the hit rate, they're looking pretty nice. Over 77% of all the titles that they bring in are selling well, or selling at all. 31 though, definitely want to look at those and see which titles those are, and consider getting rid of those and maybe not buying. If there's a trend that you see when you look at that list, YA zombie novels or something, then maybe don't bring those in anymore. And then the turns in here look crazy good. So generally speaking, they are rocking with turnover in this particular category. And again, so it's 171 titles, relatively small, really. You can kind of picture that on the shelf. It's probably a bay, and just kind of see, that bay turns really well. This is something that they should be proud of, I think. They probably are. They probably say that this is their their go-to destination category, and they would be right. So that's kind of how you dive into each of these genre detailed pages. I'm going to jump to the end here and look at some appendix stuff. So the appendix A is the raw data. So this is going to be each measurement and each score presented in its bare bonesness without all the graphs. So you're going to still see the color coding and see that the reds are still below average and the dark greens are looking amazing. Like, what is this? Education, 27 titles, but 15 turns. That's pretty crazy. That's good. But as you get used to this, so I wrote the help documentation here, and I was going around looking for good examples. Just wanted a good page to look at to display what I was wanting to show. And I would go right to this page when I looked at an account and just see, like, what are they doing best with? And if I wanted to see something that looked horrible, I would just go look hunting for red, basically. So it's actually a nice. The color coding is kind of nice to give you an idea of how things are performing. And again, so that I think that's the way that the abacus works, right? Is that you get your numbers, your financial numbers, and you can see, this is, my rent, but how does that compare to other people's rent and that kind of thing. So it's the same kind of idea where you're presented with the numbers, but then shown kind of some context for it as well, which, traditionally you have to look at, if you compare YA, sci-fi, and fantasy to historical fiction, right? Like, just to see, like, which category in your store is stronger, but how does that fit into the larger context? So that's kind of the whole deal here. So the next appendix is the explanation of the metric. So again, if you're not sure exactly what the freshness metric is, this will explain to you how all that works. And then it goes through the relevance, hit rate, and turnover. And that's the full report. So I'm going to do a little quick review. I want to make sure that you know how to find those help documents. Again, that's the gear and open help resources, and there's going to be a lot of step-by-step how to read the shelf report kind of stuff. And then you can create a shortcut to your shelf report by adding a widget to your homepage, and you can make sure that the best people at your store, including yourself, are getting the next email report by clicking into their privileges. Boop. And then you just want to save that. All right, and that is it, guys. If you have questions, your best bet is to email us at support@abovethetreeline.com, and we'll get right with you. And otherwise, happy report carding. If you're a bookseller, you probably enjoyed report card day back in the day. Maybe not necessarily. But yeah, thanks. We will talk to you guys later on.